Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Diane Bystrom, Maggie Luttrell, and Senator Hillary Clinton.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Diane Bystrom. I'm the director of the Carrie Chapman Catt Center for Women in Politics at Iowa State University. On behalf of the Catt Center, the university's lecture program, and Iowa State University, which, as you can see from our sign, is celebrating our 150th birthday, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's presentation by U.S. Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton, the 2007 Mary Louise Smith Chair in Women in Politics at Iowa State University. This chair was created by Iowa State in 1995 to honor Mary Louise Smith, an Iowa native and longtime political and civic leader. Smith, the first and only woman to chair the Republican National Party, was a mentor, friend, and role model to many of us in the world of politics and public service. Throughout her life, Smith was praised for her grace, intellect, integrity, and for her commitment to fairness, human rights, and equal opportunity. She was the epitome of a political leader and community activist, inspiring others to work to improve the political process, government, and society. We're pleased that several members of Mary Louise Smith's family could join us today, and I'd like to ask them to stand. Granddaughter Becky Beach of Des Moines. And grandson Dr. Robert Smith and great-granddaughter Chessa Jean Smith of Kansas City. Through the Mary Louise Smith Chair, the Catt Center is pleased to have hosted 16 women who have served in leadership positions in the U.S. Congress, in the President's Cabinet, in the U.S. military, in national and international women's organizations, and in broadcast and print media. Since the chair was created in 1995, the Catt Center has hosted every woman who has sought the Republican or Democratic nomination for president, including Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton, who we are pleased to honor tonight with the 2007 Mary Louise Smith Chair in Women in Politics. Introducing Senator Clinton will be Maggie Luttrell, a junior majoring in history and women's studies from Jacksonville, Illinois, as you all know, the senator's home state. Maggie is an excellent example of the students who participate in the leadership programs offered by the Carrie Chapman Catt Center for Women in Politics, and many of my students are seated right down below, so they're here for our support and Maggie's. In her 3 years at Iowa State, Maggie has participated in each and every one of the Catt Center's leadership program. We first became acquainted with Maggie as a freshman when she was a member of our Advancing Citizenship Together, or we call it ACT, learning community. She also holds the Jane Greiman Legacy of Heroines Scholarship, named in memory of our former state representative in Ames. Maggie has earned academic credit through 2 of our 3 leadership classes, and I just heard today that she enrolled in my class for the spring, so she'll be back in that. So she will be completing her 3rd class, and she'll get a leadership certificate from the Catt Center. She is currently co-president of our Catt Associates Student Leadership Organization, and now the peer mentor for our ACT freshman learning community. Maggie also is very involved in local politics as a senator to the Iowa State Government of the Student Body and as a student ex officio member of the Ames City Council, and she is the first woman to hold that position in Ames. Yeah. And I can also tell you that many of us wish she had a vote on the Ames City Council, so perhaps we can get that accomplished too. Maggie was recently selected to receive the Student Woman of Achievement Award by the YWCA of Ames ISU, and she'll be receiving that award on November 13th. We are just thrilled that members of Maggie's family can be with us today, all from Jacksonville, Illinois, and I'd like them to stand too. We have her mother, Becky, her father, Jim, and her sisters, Amanda and Rachel Luttrell, again, all of Jacksonville, Illinois, and so we're so pleased they can be here. And Maggie, we are pleased that you can represent the Cat Center students in introducing Senator Clinton.
Thank you, Diane. Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton is the only First Lady of the United States elected to public office, and the first woman elected independently statewide in New York. As First Lady, she was a representative and key figure at the 1995 United Nations Conference on Women in Beijing, promoting women's rights globally. She also helped create the Adoption and Safe Families Act of 1997, which moved children from foster care to adoption more quickly. Senator Clinton was first elected to the United States Senate in November 2000. She was re-elected by a wide margin in 2006. In 2007, she formed an exploratory committee to seek the Democratic Party's nomination for president in 2008. As senator, she serves on the Health, Education, Labor and Pensions Committee, the Environment and Public Works Committee, the Special Committee on Aging, and the Senate Armed Services Committee. She has also authored legislation to improve recruitment and retention of nurses, expand health benefits for members of the National Guard and Reserves, improve the quality and lower the cost of prescription drugs, and protect our food supply from bioterrorism. Senator Clinton's 1995 book, It Takes a Village, is about the responsibility we all have to help children succeed, became an international bestseller. She's donated the proceeds, more than $1 million, to children's causes across the country. Senator Clinton's autobiography, Living History, was also a bestseller. It has been translated into 12 languages and sold over 1.3 million copies. A graduate of Wellesley College and Yale Law School, she is married to former President Bill Clinton, and they have one daughter, Chelsea. Senator Clinton has twice been named one of the top 100 most influential lawyers in America. She inspires women of every generation to become more involved in the political realm. The Carrie Chapman Catt Center for Women in Politics is proud to welcome its fall 2007 Mary Louise Smith Chair, Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton, to Iowa State University.
Thank you so much, Maggie, for that wonderful introduction and for your student leadership and concern about all of these issues. And I'm delighted that your family could be here with you to see the excellent presentation you just made. And I want to thank Dr. Diane Bystrom for her outstanding leadership as well, and to the Catt Center and Iowa State for hosting this event, and for all of their work to promote and celebrate women in politics. I also want to recognize Bonnie Campbell, Iowa's former Attorney General, Elaine Baxter, Iowa's former Secretary of State, and all of the elected officials who are here. Also, Christy Vilsack, former First Lady, and my many friends who have gathered here for this occasion, including some of my friends from Arkansas who are traveling around Iowa this week, and especially to the students and faculty of Iowa State. It's wonderful being here and having this honor to actually talk for a few minutes about women and politics and women in politics. I could say that it's a pleasure being up here with all of the women running for president in 2008, but I'd like to make a prediction that while there may be plenty of room on the stage tonight, someday there will be enough of us to transform this event from a lecture into a debate, and I look forward to that. Finally, I want to thank the members of Mary Louise Smith's family who have joined us tonight. Talk about a trailblazing woman in public life. Mary Louise Smith started at the grassroots right here in Iowa, working her way up to become the first woman chair of the Republican National Committee. This was not an easy feat for a woman in 1974. But with her signature poise and her intelligence and integrity, Mary Louise Smith proved to be more than up to the challenge. In addition to being an accomplished organizer and leader, she was also a passionate advocate for women's rights, reproductive choice, and many other important causes. She was a role model and an inspiration for many, and I am honored by this chair that bears her name. And of course, there is this center's namesake, the great Carrie Chapman Catt. I and every other woman who holds this chair does so in part because of her life's work. Raised right here in Iowa, a graduate of this university, she served as a teacher, a school principal, a superintendent, and a reporter before joining the women's suffrage movement and realizing her talents as a gifted organizer and dynamic orator. She did 2 stints as president of the National American Women's Suffrage Association, and she helped to found the International Alliance to reach out to women across the world. In the end, it was Catt who devised the winning plan for the suffrage movement, a plan to campaign simultaneously for suffrage at both the state and national levels. The rest, as they say, is history. And it really is quite a history, isn't it? There has never been a better time to be a woman in America. It's almost hard to explain to young women today how much things have changed, even just during the course of my own lifetime. Growing up, there were sports we couldn't play, schools we couldn't attend, jobs that essentially had a men-only sign on them. As an 8th grader, I was captivated by space travel. I wrote to NASA asking how to apply to be an astronaut. They wrote back explaining that these positions weren't open to women. Well, today, Iowa's own Peggy Whitson has been appointed the first female commander of the International Space Station. Years later, when I was deciding where I wanted to attend law school, I was coolly informed by a Harvard law professor, and I quote, "We don't need any more women at Harvard." So I went to Yale. And my entering class had 235 students, of whom just 27 were women. Today, women are the majority of students in law schools. As a young lawyer, when I told a colleague that I might want to practice courtroom law, he replied that that was impossible because I didn't have a wife. He asked me, "When you're in trial and you're busy, who will make sure you have clean socks for court?" Well, I had honestly never thought about that because I'd always washed my own socks. Well, today women are serving across America as judges and partners, as law professors, and yes, even successful courtroom lawyers with clean socks. The norms are changing on Capitol Hill. Back in the mid-1980s, women were not allowed to wear pantsuits on the Senate floor. Clearly, I would not have survived back then. And today, we have sworn in the first Madam Speaker of the House of Representatives. We've even seen, much I'm sure to that old Harvard law professor's chagrin, the first woman president of Harvard University. You know, women are now a majority of students in colleges and a majority of those who voted in 2004. It is nothing short of breathtaking when you stop to think about it. But all of this progress is not a quirk of fate. It didn't happen by accident. It is the result of the contributions of women and men from every background, serving at every level, using their diverse array of skills and talents to move our nation forward. Contributions from national leaders like Carrie Chapman Catt and her colleagues in the suffrage movement, trailblazers right here in Iowa like Belle Babb Mansfield, who in 1869 became the first woman in America formally admitted to the bar. Women like Sojourner Truth, who campaigned both against slavery and for women's suffrage, or Harriet Tubman, who risked her life time and again so others could taste the fruits of freedom. Courageous women around the world like Aung San Suu Kyi, who has been a virtual prisoner for decades in the cause of freedom for the Burmese people. Women who run for office in their own countries against some tough odds, like Angela Merkel in Germany and Michelle Bachelet in Chile and Ellen Johnson Sirleaf in Liberia. But it is not just women leaders in the history books who have made history. It is also those unsung heroes who transform lives and communities every single day. The teachers who tell our daughters, "You're just as smart and capable as the boys, and don't you fail to live up to your potential." I think about my 6th grade teacher, Mrs. King, who, quoting from the Bible, said not to hide your light under the bushel basket. The women on the PTA who wonder why there aren't more girls in those honors, math, and science classes. I remember when my daughter was in 1st grade, joining up with a couple of other mothers to do extra science programs for our 1st graders. And all those mothers who work all day, sleep a few hours, do the night shift because they want something better for their children. Some women have fought lonely battles, forging ahead on their own when no one else would stand by their side. I think of Edna Griffin, called the Rosa Parks of Iowa. On July 7th, 1948, she was refused service at a Des Moines lunch counter. But Edna Griffin responded by organizing pickets in front of the store. And when no one else joined her, she would picket alone. And she took her case all the way to the Iowa Supreme Court, and she won. Other women have had the benefit of networks of women drawn together by shared experiences and aspirations. I've had the privilege of traveling to more than 80 countries, and everywhere I went as First Lady and now as Senator, I have tried to find time to meet with women in the countries where I find myself, to ask them what their lives are like, what kind of opportunities and challenges they face. I remember a woman in Northern Ireland by the name of Joyce McCartan. Joyce, a Catholic, had lost more than a dozen family members during the so-called Troubles, including her own 17-year-old son who was shot dead by Protestant gunmen. But instead of retreating into anger and grief and wanting revenge, she brought together a group of both Protestant and Catholic women to set up a safe house for women of both traditions to talk about their needs and their fears over cups of tea. I sat down with those women one day, and I listened as they talked about how they had discovered that they all worried when their husbands and sons left their homes, and they were all relieved when they returned safely. And despite their differences, they wanted a better future for their country and their children. It was these women and others like them, sitting around kitchen tables, sharing pots of tea, who helped chart the path to peace. Here at home, during my time in the Senate, I have cherished the opportunity to work with my women colleagues in both houses and on both sides of the aisle. Now, we may not see eye to eye on everything, But we get together and we trade those very important bits of advice, like what kind of shoes to wear on marble floors when you're on your feet all day. And when it comes to the issues that we can agree on, whether it's after-school funding or health care and education for women here in America or for women in Afghanistan, we are a force to be reckoned with. I've been honored to work throughout my career on issues like foster care and adoption, family leave, equal pay, preschool for our children. And I've always been struck when people label these issues as women's issues. I disagree with that characterization. While these so-called kitchen table issues are certainly women's issues, they're also men's issues and children's issues. They're issues that we all have a stake in. Today, too many men have to choose between health insurance for themselves or for their children because they can't afford both. When women make just 77 cents for every dollar a man earns, it's not just women who are affected, but families with less income to pay the bills. We're all worried about whether the next generation of children will have the tools they need to compete in the global economy. Today, many fathers are struggling to spend more time with their families just like mothers always have. In fact, the issue of family leave provides a particularly good example. I'll never forget a newspaper advice column that I read in the early 1980s. I was working at a law firm at the time, and my daughter was about 3 years old. Someone had written into this column asking, "I'm about to get a big promotion, and I'm going to have my own office for the first time. What kind of decorations are appropriate for my office?" Well, the advice columnist responded that he needed to know if the writer was a man or a woman because it would affect the answer. If you're a man, he said, and you have a family, put up lots of pictures of your family because people will think when they come into your office, this is a stable person with a good set of family values. But if you're a woman, don't put any pictures of your family in your office because people will think you can't keep your mind on your job. So, of course, I immediately filled my office with pictures of my family. Well, a lot has changed since then. But unfortunately, this attitude is still around. It kind of sums up too many people's feelings toward women and parents in the workplace. Keep your family life to yourself, struggle on your own to meet the demands of work and family, and don't let it affect your work. But think about this for a minute. A lot of working fathers wish they had more time with their children. All employers want employees to be focused and productive, which is hard to achieve when work and family are out of balance. And every American has a stake in how the next generation is raised. After all, we're raising our future innovators, our college professors, our nurses, our business leaders, our farmers, teachers, and so much more. So when we fight to strengthen family leave, that helps not just women, but all Americans who want to spend more time with the people they love and care for. That's why I'm fighting for paid family leave, because no one should have to worry if they need a couple of hours to take their child to the doctor. And no one should be denied the chance to bond with their newborn or adopted baby, or to care for an aging parent. I think we should encourage the development of families working to take care of one another. There's so much caregiving that goes on in our country, we sometimes overlook it. But if all the caregivers, people who devote most or all of their time caring for a child, caring for a parent, caring for a loved one with a disability, if all of those Americans were to decide tomorrow to stop giving that out of love, to replace that care would cost $300 billion a year. People give it because they love, they have a sense of family obligation, they want to do the right thing. And we make it very, very hard for for families to care for one another. Instead of focusing on what really is going on in people's lives, too often our politics is about distractions. Who's up or who's down, what people are wearing more than what they're saying. Well, there will always be that kind of analysis, but in the end, none of that really matters very much. What matters are the lives of the people I meet every day, who feel like they're invisible, like no one's paying attention to them and their struggles, like the woman I met from LeClaire who had to sell half her family farm to pay for her family's medical bills. She sure feels invisible. Or the woman that I met at the Maid-Rite in Toledo who was working 2 jobs and still struggling to get by. I think she wonders whether anybody really sees how hard she's been working. The woman in Greenville whose daughter got sick but didn't have health insurance, she died a year later. She was just 18 years old. Her death certificate listed the cause of death as unknown because she was never able to afford to get a proper diagnosis. Well, I don't think that any of these people should be invisible in our country. They're certainly not invisible to me. I see them, I hear them, I carry their stories with me wherever I go. And they shouldn't be invisible in our political process. One of the aspects of politics that has changed dramatically with the entry of so many women is that a lot of these stories are now just out there. People are talking about them, trying to determine what to do to give someone who is struggling a better chance. When I think about the struggle that women had to even get the vote, I don't get discouraged, I get inspired. The first women's convention was held in Seneca Falls, New York in 1848. It was a hot July, and a group of women decided that they wanted to meet together in the Wesleyan Chapel in Seneca Falls to see if they could draft a statement claiming their rights as women. At that time, of course, our laws didn't really give women rights in any aspect of life, not just at the voting booth, but in inheritance and marriage and child custody and so much else. So these women and a few brave men joined together on that hot July day to begin a process that led to the Declaration of Sentiments. It was the first document that we know of anywhere in the world where a group of people had come and said, women deserve their rights. Only one woman who was there at that convention lived long enough to see women get the vote in America. It took more than 70 years from the start of the movement until the 19th Amendment was passed. More than 70 years of faith and devotion, protesting and lobbying. And when I think about the challenges we face today in politics, I always am in awe of how hard these other women had to struggle to get what we take for granted. Ultimately, they did succeed because even in the face of the most heartbreaking setbacks, they never lost sight of what mattered, and they refused to give up. I've always loved the story of how back in 1915, Kat and her colleagues believed that winning in New York was critical to winning at the federal level. So they fought their hearts out. They held 10,300 meetings. They handed out 7.5 million leaflets. They raised nearly $100,000, a staggering sum in those days. But in the end, they lost by nearly 200,000 votes. That night, Kat was asked how long this defeat would delay their fight nationally. She replied, "Only until we can get a little sleep." And 2 days after that loss, they started a new campaign with a new slogan, Victory in 1917. I'm grateful to her and countless others because I know that every day I walk in the paths that they cleared and benefit from the victories they won. Now, some might say that their work is finished in America, since women no longer face legal obstacles to education or employment or the right to vote. But we know that even though the legal barriers have fallen away, economic and attitudinal ones still remain. And that so long as there are gaps between our aspirations and our reality, their work and ours is not finished. That more perfect union still awaits. If we truly want to finish what Kat and her colleagues started, then it's time we stopped paying women 77 cents on the dollar when they work 60 minutes of the hour just like men do. We can see that we are still not where we need to be because just this year, the United States Supreme Court heard a case of a woman named Lilly Ledbetter. Lilly Ledbetter worked in a factory in Alabama. She worked there for over 20 years. She was a good worker. She became a supervisor, the only woman to be a supervisor. And year after year, she did the same work that all of the male supervisors did. And about 20 years into her work, she learned she had never been paid the same as all of the men. Men with lesser seniority, younger men, and she wondered why, and she tried to find out. And basically, her employer wouldn't answer her questions. And Lilly Ledbetter didn't want to take that for an answer. So she started talking to people in town, and somebody sent her to a lawyer, and the lawyer said, that's against the Equal Pay Act, and we've had the Equal Pay Act on the books since 1963. They can't do that. So the lawyer called the factory, and the factory wouldn't talk to the lawyer. So the lawyer brought a lawsuit, and Lilly Ledbetter won in court, and the factory appealed it. And she won in the appellate court, and the factory appealed it to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court has changed in composition, as you know. And all of a sudden, after everyone thought that the cases had been settled, that if you are discriminated for doing the same job as a woman that a man is doing, you are entitled to back pay for as long as you have been doing that job, as a way to deter other employers from practicing discrimination and to make good on the many hours of work that were not fairly compensated. Well, the new Supreme Court found a reason to deny Lilly Ledbetter back pay for all of those years. It came up with a theory that nobody had ever heard of before. So don't believe that the hard work is over. We still have a long way to go. If we truly want to finish what Kat and her colleagues started, then it's time we did more than just talking about family values. We need to adopt policies that truly value families. And for that, we should stand for universal pre-kindergarten all the way through to affordable college, from quality, affordable health care for every American to retirement security for every American, paid leave, flexible workplaces. We need to recognize the challenges that so many people face today. You know, the economy is much more difficult. The average American family has lost $1,000 in income in the last 6 years. But the costs of everything else have gone up: healthcare, education, energy, and gas. It's much tougher for young families to really pull together the time they need for each other. The biggest concern that a lot of young families tell me is that they just don't have enough time. They're working as hard as they can. They're worried about their future. They're anxious about everything from whether they have enough put away to tide them over on a rainy day to what happens in the mortgage market and what's going on if somebody in their family gets sick. If we truly want to finish what Kat and her colleagues started, then we need to do something about our national debt, $9 trillion and counting. Every baby born today starts life with $30,000 of debt on his or her tiny shoulders, the largest birth tax in history. And if we truly want to finish the work that Carrie Chapman Catt and her colleagues started, then we must truly use the power of the vote to make our voices heard, to take our leaders to task, to build the kind of future we want for our children and our grandchildren. In 2004, more than 35 million women did not vote. You know, for so long, Carrie Chapman Catt and all the women who worked with her were silenced by others. Today, too many women silence themselves. As Kat once said, the vote is a power, a weapon of offense and defense, a prayer. Understand what it means and what it can do for your country. Today, more than ever, we know what the vote can do for our country. I meet people who are ready to use it, who have never used it before. I'm always struck when someone tells me they're voting for the first time. Often it's a young person turning 18. Sometimes it's a much older person who has just never registered and never voted. And then I meet people who never miss an election. They believe it's their duty and responsibility to show up whenever the polls are open. I've met a lot of women in their 90s who tell me they were born before women could vote, and they want to live long enough to see a woman in the White House. And I love it when I hear mothers and fathers whispering to their little girls, "See, honey, in this country you can be anything you want to be." Well, that's what I believe about our sons and our daughters. There should be no limits on any of our children in America. But we have to do the hard work to make sure that is true. And all too often, people give up their beliefs and convictions because they don't vote, leaving the field free to those who may not share their views, who don't care about the same issues that they care about, but are willing to be there when it counts. We need to do everything we can to heed Carrie Chapman Catt's admonition to roll up your sleeves and set your mind to making history. That's what Americans have been doing for over 200 years. It wasn't by accident that the first meeting ever held in the world to talk about and write down what rights women were entitled to happened in America. We have to keep faith with the work, the struggle, and the sacrifice of those who have come before. We have to be reminded from time to time that freedom isn't free and equality cannot be taken for granted. Every generation faces new challenges, and every generation has to step up and be heard and exercise their constitutional rights to make a difference. That's what we do when we're at our best in America. I want Americans to start acting like Americans again. We face a lot of challenges here at home and around the world. We need to set big goals, goals that will bring out the best in our country, goals that will unite us, goals that will respect each and every one of us and cherish the contribution that we can make to this great nation. I know that There's a lot of work to be done, but I relish the opportunity to be part of making history with all of you, because this country deserves the very best that each and every one of us can offer. Thank you all very, very much.
Great. Senator Clinton, thank you so much for that really excellent review. I sat here, I'm almost taking notes. I'm teaching women in political leadership again, and I thought I need to get all that information down. For the inspiring women in Iowa, including Carrie Chapman Catt, who made so much progress to get women the right to vote, for those achievements, and really inspiring words of how much further we need to go. And I know a lot of students in this room will be leading that charge. We do have some time for questions. In the spirit of the Mary Louise Smith Chair, which one of the roles of the chair is to inspire students to public leadership, I'd like to start with some questions from students. And I hope some of you brought questions tonight. And I've got some people from the lectures program helping me with Mike. So anybody interested in asking a question? And our students over here, let's see. Okay.
I saw a hand, right? Is
Okay,
it
Chenru, okay.
It's very dark. I'm sorry,
It
we
is
can't
hard
see.
from here.
Checking. Hello, Senator Clinton, thank you again for coming to speak with us. I'm interested in supporting you for the 2008 campaign, so I hope you don't mind that I ask you a question in regarding to your campaign.
Sure.
And I hope it doesn't come across as negative, because...
Don't worry, honey. I've been asked nearly everything in my life.
Okay, well, you know, there's been talks about how you take money from, you know, special interests and large corporations. So I was just wondering what your justification for that was.
Well, first of all, corporations are forbidden for giving money. They cannot directly give money, but they do form these associations called PACs where they can give money. And I have taken the view that it's artificial for someone to say that they don't take money from lobbyists or PACs, but they take money from the individuals who employ the lobbyists and who set up the PACs. That's a very artificial distinction. I think what's more important is to look at people's voting records, look where they stand. I believe that I have probably taken on more special interests more directly than probably anyone else running. It's one of the reasons why I'm sometimes subjected to, let us say, a rather negative set of attacks from the other side. But I don't mind that, because I think it's important to stand up. I've taken on the health insurance industry, and I continue to take on the health insurance industry. I've taken on the drug industry. I've taken on big oil and a lot of the associated problems that they cause our country. So I'm going to continue to take on interests, and I ask people to look at what I have done, what I advocate, and what I have voted for. And I know that, you know, some of my opponents make this as an issue, but it's really, to me, it is more important what you stand for and what you voted for, because if you do take money from the people who employ the lobbyists, what's the difference? And if you take money from the people who run the corporations but are not themselves the lobbyists, that's not a distinction. So the important thing is who stands up and fights when it matters. And I have, you know, voted against the drug companies on the Medicare prescription drug bill. I have voted against a lot of the insurance companies' efforts to, in my view, really get subsidized for providing health care for our seniors through some of these programs that they run. And I will continue to stand up and fight for what I think is right.
We have a question over here. Okay. And yes, and you might want to say your name also. I should have said this also. I'm Chenru Zhang. She's with our program, so I know Chenru.
Hi, my name is Mika Wilford, and I know you mentioned education in your speech, and I was just wondering how, if elected president, you plan on repairing the severed connection between those who create our national educational policy and have supported the policy No Child Left Behind, which continues to frustrate our teachers and our students who know that it's not actually helping anything?
Well, that is such a great question, because I am determined that we're going to change No Child Left Behind and end the unfunded mandate that it represents. And, you know, there are a lot of people in the audience who obviously understand this problem, but I'm sure there are others who don't. I mean, the idea behind No Child Left Behind, which is President Bush's signature education policy, is not a bad idea. The idea was that the federal government would put considerably more federal resources into our schools in return for the schools agreeing to have a series of tests that would determine where they stood. You know, the problem is that the administration never came up with the money that was promised, and the way they've implemented this has really been destructive to the way schools need to run. And there are a couple of things that are particularly troubling. They created this measurement called Adequate Yearly Progress, AYP, and they keyed it to proficiency levels that would be set by the states. So let's assume you're a teacher and you have, let's say, 25 children in your class. Let's say you have 5 children who are special education, who've been mainstreamed. Maybe you have 5 children for whom English is not their first language. And then you have 15 children with varying degrees of ability, from needing a lot of help to, being very advanced. And you take those 25 children, in the beginning of the year, you determine where they stand as a group, and say their average on a scale of 1 to 5 is a 2. And you're told that proficiency in the subject area is a 5. And you work so hard all year with those individual children, and you get it up to a 4, which for a lot of the children who started out at 1 or 2 is an amazing accomplishment. Well, you're still going to be labeled as failing. That is not motivating. That is not recognizing the hard work that teachers do. That is not being realistic about what we want each child to achieve. I much prefer what are called growth models. I think the real goal in education should be to enable every child to live up to his or her God-given potential, and to create a circumstance in which that learning can take place. So there are many things about No Child Left Behind that I have real problems with, but the core way it is being implemented, I think, is at variance with how we can best try to improve education and give teachers the support they need to do their best work, and encourage schools as a whole to make improvement, and give children the reinforcement that they require to believe that they are learning. So I have passionate feelings about this, and I will try, when I'm president, to make sure we have an education policy that reflects what actually goes on in the classrooms of America.
Okay, I think we have a question over here.
Hello, Senator. I'm obviously a student here and a feminist, and I just feel at this point in my life, as I'm making decisions, I feel stuck in a bind, in kind of a catch-22 between, should I have a family, should I have a career, should I have both? How can I manage this? Because it's not an easy decision. It's probably the thing I struggle with most in making decisions about my future. So I just was wondering how you approach this challenge, and how you might try to improve my lot in making decisions.
I am asked this question so often by young women, and I really appreciate your asking it, because it's hard. And most of the young women asking me want to have both. They want to have a chance to have a family, if that's their choice, and they want to be able to continue working and make a contribution to the family income as well as to their own satisfaction. And I think we make it about as hard as we possibly can for young women and men, but let's focus on young women for the moment, because I think that still women bear a disproportionate share of the burden of making these decisions and trying to do the balancing act that too many of us are forced into. So I think we need to do more to have a set of family policies that create a context in which you can make the decisions that are best for you. Therefore, I really believe that we need to extend family and medical leave. You know, the Family and Medical Leave Act was the first bill that my husband signed into law. It allows people working in businesses where there are 50 or more employees to have unpaid leave for family emergencies, your own sickness, your child's sickness, the birth of a child, caring for an aging parent. It has been used by more than 50 million Americans, but a lot of Americans can't use it because it doesn't apply to establishments that have fewer than 50 employees, and it's unpaid. So many people can't figure out how to make that work for themselves. I want to drop the threshold down to 25 and to at least include more people so that we can give those choices more broadly. But in addition to unpaid leave, I would like to help the states begin to experiment with paid leave. A couple of states are doing that. California has recently passed a provision for paid leave, because what we have done is to give advantages again in our society to higher paid workers. Most professional women who are in large firms are eligible for paid leave. You know, when I was pregnant all those years ago, I was practicing law, and the law firm I was in was, by Arkansas standards, large, but by national standards, small. And they had never even thought about a family leave policy back in 1980. So I just kept getting more and more pregnant. And, you know, I would walk down the hallway in my law firm, and the men would sort of say hello and then move their heads because nobody wanted to talk about it. And I would say, well, what are we going to do when I have the baby? Well, we'll get to it. We'll get to it. So Chelsea came early. She was about 3 weeks early, and so we never finished the conversation. And I, you know, called after she was born, and I said, you know, I want to take some time off. And they said, well, fine, that's okay. But I had the position where I could say that. And today, many professional women are given that opportunity, but a lot of other women in the professions and in other workplaces are not. And I think it's another example of how we're becoming such an unequal society. You know, my friends who have babies who are working as lawyers or doctors, they take time off, 3 months, 4 months, and then they go back to work or go back even part-time. But a lot of women who don't have that option are barely given time off to recover from childbirth, to bond with their baby, and to go to work. So it's not fair to put some women in a position where they have these choices and other women who don't. So I'd like to see us move toward paid leave and to create opportunities for states to experiment. And then when I'm president, I hope to be able to have a network of such plans. I also think it's important that we try to encourage employers to do more with flex time and telecommuting. You know, a lot of work can be done from home now because we obviously have all this technology. And I want to encourage employers to think about how that can be done. It really does, even if it's just like a day a week or a half a day, you get some time to be able to better manage all of these new responsibilities. So there's a lot that I hope we can do. But finally, for me, I hope you figure out a way, if this is what you want, not to be worried about how to balance it. You know, necessity is the mother of invention, and there are so many ways to figure this out. It helps if you know, have another parent who is going to care about this balance and will try to be supportive of you. It helps if you have a network of friends. I would like to see us do more where we really do help each other, and particularly help young women. A lot of grandparents are doing more with childcare. They're helping to fill in. It's especially difficult for single moms. You know, you find yourself on your own and you're raising one or more children, and the balancing act is just unbelievably challenging. So there's things that government can do to make it easier. There are things employers can do to make it easier. There are things extended families can do, and there are things that friends and neighbors and colleagues can do. When whenever I have worked in any workplace, I've always tried to make the workplace more family friendly. And, in the White House, we had young women who were married and were pregnant and wondered what would happen to their jobs. And I said, in those early months, children are really portable. So after your leave is over, bring them into the office. And, that's what I intend to do back in the White House again, is to make it family friendly and to set an example for the rest of the country.
I think we have time for one more question, and I know this young man has had his hand up for a long time, so, and also as an equal opportunity center, I want to call on a guy.
Hi. I was wondering, if you become president, will habeas corpus apply to all captives and prisoners of the United States under all circumstances?
Well, I voted against the Republican bill to strip habeas corpus. I have voted to reinstate habeas corpus. I think it's one of the most serious challenges to the Constitution that the Bush and Cheney administration have waged. So I certainly intend to reinstate habeas corpus. Now, that may not mean full habeas corpus for foreigners or for certain classes of prisoners, but there will be habeas corpus, certainly to the extent of having the right to challenge the basis of your confinement and to make it real and to create a judicial remedy that now really doesn't exist. The suspension of habeas corpus during the Civil War by President Lincoln was later submitted to the Congress for ratification and approval because President Lincoln believed rightly that even if he had the emergency power during wartime, he should not exercise it for any length of time without having the concurrence of the Congress. What we've seen with this president and vice president is a power grab that is really turning the Constitution upside down and undermining our standing in the world, our moral authority, our values, the rule of law. And I don't think that's the side that America wants to be on. It's not only about habeas corpus, but I think habeas corpus, which goes back to England, and the rights of the individual to know why the crown was holding him, is something that we should not be giving up. Yes, it's going to be difficult to work exactly out all of the parameters of how best to treat those who are not members of any armed forces. They are combatants who have allegiance to terrorist networks. This is a new kind of adversary, but we shouldn't be giving up our hard-won freedoms and our values, which have been the hallmark of our country for generations. We should be figuring out how best to apply them, and that's what I will try to do.
Well, thank you for, again, coming to Iowa State University on the invitation of the Carrie Chapman Catt Center, the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, the Lectures Program, and Iowa State University. As I noted in our opening remarks, it's the 150th birthday of Iowa State. And Iowa State, being a land-grant university, was founded on the principles of equal access to all and have admitted women from the time it was founded. As you noted, Carrie Chapman Catt graduated in 1880, only woman in her class. We hear you have a birthday coming up on Friday. And so to celebrate Iowa State's 150th birthday and your much, much younger birthday, we have a Iowa State sesquicentennial t-shirt for a birthday present. I suppose you'll need to be a little careful wearing it around Iowa City, but it's got Cy on the back, so anyway, again, thank you so much to all of you that came today to hear Senator Clinton's remarks. Again, to me, a fascinating review. I love the stuff of women's history, the progress they've made, the accomplishments of Carrie Chapman Catt, the accomplishments of Mary Louise Smith, the accomplishments of Senator Clinton and her colleagues in the U.S. Congress who are really leading the way. And I think an inspiration to all of our students here today, both male and female, about what they can give back to their community, to their leadership in their communities to make a difference, as Senator Clinton said, in the world. So I appreciate you coming. I do also want to note that while this is an academic event and it was a great lecture, we do have an information table on the main lobby staffed by the Iowa State Students for Hillary Clinton. So if you want to drop by that desk, you certainly can, and pick up whatever they have upstairs. I think they've got all sorts of memorabilia, so our students are staffing that at Iowa State. So again, on behalf of Iowa State University, thank you for coming and serving as the 16th Mary Louise Smith Chair in Women in Politics.